Welcome, everybody. Thank you very much for listening to the third episode of Securing Tomorrow podcast, brought to you in part by myself, Jack Freedman. I am a certified financial planner at Bickling Financial Services, also the head of our investment committee. The goal of the podcast is to empower our clients through education, helping them understand the why behind each decision so that they can invest with confidence. By cutting through the noise and avoiding the pull of short-term trends, we stay focused on what truly matters, investing with clarity, conviction, and care. The Securing Tomorrow podcast has many topics in each episode, which will bring the best and the brightest folks I work with to you with the common segments of Pros Ask Pros, many misconceptions, horrible headlines, and intelligence that isn't artificial, each segment. I wanted to bring Spencer Betts, one of my bosses here at Bickling Financial Services, to the podcast. Spencer Betts is a CFP and a CFP board ambassador, a owner at Bickling Financial Services, and has his bachelor's from Old Dominion University in physics, has a Dalmatian puppy, played soccer, and does just about every water sport imaginable. We're going to focus on finance, lucrative nature of retirement plans, as well as the innuendos of owning a business. And we're hopefully going to get into your mind as a business owner. But welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. And like I said, we're going to talk about financial planning, stuff we do all day, DC, DB plans, and the fact that you're a manager and a boss. So,
yeah,
I guess let's start with how did you go from physics, something that's very measured, to something that's a little less measured, like financial planning?
So physics, I got a bachelor's in physics, and that's really a data analysis degree, right? So that's basically what we did is we looked at different things and tried to figure out why a line would move up and down if you were graphing it, how an object moved. So it was all about kind of data analysis. I went off and I started my career doing computer engineering. I was working on modeling of nuclear aircraft carriers. So I was on the backside of it, really being a software engineer, computer engineer. Then wanted to move back home, and it was almost like a coin flip between continuing to do that at a company like a Raytheon or coming to work for the family business. I decided I could always go back to engineering. So I wanted to give the family business a shot. And then I really liked it, right? The one thing I didn't like about what I was doing is it was very isolating. I had my cubicle, I'd stare at my computer, I would do a lot of testing, a lot of programming, writing of code, obviously back way before AI came around. So it was really kind of writing the different code, testing the code. And, at the end of the day, did a button go up or down based off of the code I was writing. That was what I was working on. And then I decided to go and give the family business a shot. And I really liked it because of the interactive nature. Getting to talk to people and interact with people was something that I liked. One of the more difficult side is, we're planning on people and what they're going to do for the next 30 years. So at the end of the day, we give people our best advice. We give people our best ideas on allocation and investing and cash flow and everything that we think they need. And I don't know if I'm right or wrong for 20 years or 30 years, right? So that's the part of the business that is probably the most difficult for me because I have such loyalty to the clients. Like I want them all to succeed. I want my model to be right. And I just have to wait for 20 years to see if my modeling is done correctly. So that's probably the most anxious part of the business is making sure that the models work out long term. Being in the business though, and now that I've been there for a while, quant analysis is huge in what we do, and that's basically a physics degree. I went back to my alma mater, Old Dominion, and I've given a number of talks to physics majors saying, hey, if you don't like physics, if you don't want to do computer engineering, if you don't want to, just sit in a cubicle and study data, you can sit in a different type of cubicle and study finance, because a lot of the quant groups, whether that's a Goldman Sachs, Citadel, a lot of private equity groups, they hire mathematicians, they hire physicists, they hire those kind of engineering brains to really look at data and see if they can find a reason why a stock goes up and down or a company goes up and down or whatever it is. And so they really like the physics, mathematical background. So it did fit into the family business, being able to do kind of that data engineering, and then being able to use that and kind of get my social part of talking with clients and working with them and getting that sort of an outlet was kind of a good mix for me within the business. And, I like working with people. The other things I really enjoy, like coaching, right? I was my sons and daughters coach for their youth sports, and I kind of like that. So, it's kind of what we do here as financial planners is you're kind of a financial coach. I think that's an overused term, but that's what we do, right? We kind of help people. We plan them out. We try and give them our best ideas and hope that they succeed, right? I mean, one of the things I love about our business is we are perfectly aligned with our clients' goals, right? They do well, we do well. Their success is our success. Our success is their success. So it's really aligned. I never feel like I'm, ever doing anything that's not in my client's best interest. We get to always just work for our clients and what they do and how they're going to succeed and, build these great relationships with some of my clients that I've had now for 15, 20 years. And that's really, really a great thing. And, just start seeing the success of some of those models that I put in when I was new in the business, and now having those clients that I've worked with over those 20-year periods be like, all right, I thought you were going to have about X when you turned 80, and we're relatively close to that number. So those have been really kind of fruitful long-term successes. So,
and that's a really good point, that a lot of what we do is rewarding, but you don't find out for many years. A lot of industries have either a right or a wrong answer that they're getting to, but along the way, there's so much that's involved in a financial plan emotionally that there's not necessarily a right answer, but it's one that it's all about the trip, right? And so we've seen so many scenarios. I say we, but you've been doing this 5 times longer than I have. Let's talk a little bit about what you've seen as the best things that clients have done and the worst things. So let's start off with maybe some pitfalls that you've seen of clients, maybe in their 20s, maybe in their 50s, maybe in their 80s, that took away from their potential greater success in their plan.
I mean, I think it's a lot of clients don't know what they don't know, or they're clinging to ideas, rules, cliches that maybe their parents had given them. And you just have to be like, why did you think that? And you got to kind of get into their head and kind of understand why they're doing what they're doing. But it's amazing how many people, I should have, a 60-40 portfolio my entire life because that's what my grandfather did. I should only buy, one type of company. I should really look at one sort of an industry. That's the only thing I should buy. And it's like, no, there's a lot more opportunities, right? Like what you learned about investing, 15, 20 years ago, what your parents learned 50 years ago doesn't really apply to now. And so I think there's a lot of that. And then the biggest thing I've seen, especially when it involves couples, is not being able to talk about money, right? I mean, one of our things that I think we do a really good job about is talking about money with people. And a lot of times, especially in couples, that's an issue, right? Sometimes the only time they talk about money is in front of us, right? Which is unfortunate because, again, you should know how much does your spouse makes. And there was an old survey, and it's less than 50% of married couples knows what the other one earns, right? If you don't know what your spouse earns, you don't talk about money with your spouse, right? I mean, that's the simplest thing to know about. And it's even sad. I think it's like 24 or 25% of people don't even know what they make, right? So like, what are you earning? Like you might even not know about it. So, the most disheartening thing is talking to people that don't know what they don't know. And then you're talking to people and you're saying, okay, well, what about your risk management? Do you have anything? Do you have wills in case something happens and you have 2 small children? Who's going to take care of them? Oh, I never got around to it. And unfortunately, we've had people who've died without wills, and it's very difficult for those survivors, right? It's very difficult to get through that process. So, I think that's probably the most difficult part is people just don't know what they don't know. And when they come to us and we give them some inspirational or just some education, it can just change their life dramatically. I use the one example. We do 401ks, and we're going to talk about that here in a little bit. But we do a lot of educations. And one of the things that we do is we don't just focus on the plan. We try and give general financial planning topics when we talk to participants of 401k plans. And one of the times we were talking about Social Security, we brought in a Social Security expert and we gave just a Social Security talk. And at the end of the talk, a lady came up to me and was like, "Did you say I can collect on my ex's Social Security?" And I was like, "Yes, like you're entitled as long as you were married for 10 years and, we went through the qualifications." But the answer in short was yes for her because she met those qualifications. Came back a year later when we did the next education, and she pulled me aside and said, it was amazing. She ended up collecting on her ex's Social Security. She got a bonus. She got a supplement every month, and now she can actually participate in the 401k plan, and it paid off a lot of her debts. And so, that was really easy for me to say and think about and talk to her about. It wasn't a lot of financial planning work to go into that conversation. It was like a 30-second conversation that I could have 100 times a day, but it changed that person's life, right? Financially, she was different a year later than when she came in. Those are like our parts of what we do. It's like something that is basic information, or at least I thought was basic information that the public doesn't have, or this particular person didn't have, changed their life dramatically financially. And that was ultra rewarding because it was literally a 30-second conversation and it changed their life. So those are the sort of events that we get to deal with. And then, a lot of other clients, like when we are able to talk to people about, all right, based on what you have saving, you can retire early, right? You want to go off and spend more time with your family, write a book, travel. You're there. You can do it, right? And that's really powerful on my side of the desk to be able to tell people like, hey, you're free. You can do it. You've earned the right to retire. Go. And a lot of people are like, well, no, I have to wait till 65 or I have to wait till 70 because that's what my parents did. Well, you did a better job saving, or, the market's different, or you're getting this inheritance. You have the money. You can go and do it. And just giving people the comfort that they are making the right financial decision is what we do all the time. And it's so rewarding.
Yeah. And the way that you start, I asked actually for one pitfall or two pitfalls, but I think the one big pitfall is right. You articulated it very well at the very beginning. It's not knowing what you don't know. Right. And if you can have somebody in your life who's asking the questions, if you fail a plan, you're planning to fail. Right. And so the biggest pitfall for people, you might do everything right. You might make a lot of money. You might save a lot of money. You might put beneficiaries on your accounts, all that sort of thing. But if you don't have an astute estate plan, then that's the last domino to fall. And you can, there are a lot of pitfalls there. So that's a good point. Now, because people are going to be listening to this and want to at least have one or two takeaways. So that was one of the great takeaways. The second question that I'm going to ask, we talked about the pitfalls. What are some really good things that people have done, your wealthiest clients, that have done along the way to grow their wealth? And then, I think a big theme that we like to look at is health, wealth, and happiness. And so, how have these clients achieved the happiness part?
I think the best thing that somebody can do is just start early on and save money, put money into an IRA or a 401k or a 403b. It doesn't have to be a lot, but it needs to be consistent, right? Some of our wealthiest clients didn't have that high of paying jobs, right? Like I had one client, she was a librarian, but her parents told her to put $50 a month away, and she did it when she was 19 starting out. And then she just did it for a long period of time. And that 50 turned into 75, maybe 100, maybe 200. But she just did it over such a long period of time, never touched it, was just very consistently putting money in. She retired. She had a lot more money than she ever needed. Like the amount of income that the portfolio was producing was more than she ever needed. I met her when she was older, and her name was Nancy, and she had more money than she was ever going to spend. And she was saying how her church wanted a new organ, and did she have enough money to donate? And I was like, yeah, like she was going to give it to her after her death. It was in her will. But I'm like, Nancy, you have more than enough money. You're never going to spend all the money you have. Why don't you give it now? Right? Why don't you give it to the church today? And so she did. And then she came in like 6 months later for another review, and she just raved about how nice the Reverend was. And he comes and picks her up now every Sunday to bring her to church. And, she gets to sit up front. And so that was her happiness, right? That really meant a lot to her. She couldn't travel or do some of the other things that by the time I met with her, but she was able to give this donation to the church. And then the church really responded with the warmth and love of the church for her at that point. And so, that was her definition of happiness. So, we can go through, everybody's definition of happiness is different, right? So what is it going to be? And that's one of the things we talk about a lot, is money is just a tool, right? So what do you want the tool to do, right? Do you want the tool to give you time? Do you want the tool to give you travel? Do you want the tool to, pay for your kids' education, or to spend time with your grandkids, or buy the big house on the lake, or buy the place in Florida, or golf every day? Like, what's your goal, right? Everybody's definition of happiness is different. And so I think what we try to talk about is like, what do you want for retirement? What would be a comfortable, idealistic retirement? Now, some people, their ideas are way beyond their portfolio, and we have to caution them and say, hey, that's probably not going to be able to happen on what you have. Let's work on a different definition, or, tear it down a little bit. And some you can say, no, go start that right now. You don't have to wait till you're 70. Start that at 65, right? Those are the great ones. And when people say, I want to retire, don't want to travel, but I really want to spend time with grandkids. And you look at that number, you're like, go, like, just start. You don't have to wait till, the 4 or 5 years. You can do it now. So that's really good. I mean, again, the one that I always caution on, like, you can't take your money with you. Like, the running joke, and you've heard this, but I'll share it with everybody else, is you don't want the best looking coffin, right? Like, spend your money. If you've been saving it your entire life, figure out a way to spend it that makes you happy. Having a lot of money in the bank account has never equated to happiness for any of our clients, right? What has turned into happiness for our clients is, again, kind of what you talked about. It's family, it's faith, it's time, right? So that's usually what people want to do. It's, their activities, their family. Those are the sort of things that people really kind of want to do in retirement. And so finding those things out, finding where you want to do it, and then making sure that you can, right? Because you never want to have to worry about, oh, well, I might have to go back to work when I'm 80 or 85. You want to make sure that you understand the consequences of your actions, I think, as early as possible, right? As soon as you know, like, hey, my goal of retiring at 60 is not going to happen. I don't want to know that at 59, right? Because I want to have a little bit more time to adjust it. I would like to know that when I'm in my early 50s. So I have, 5 years, 6 years to deal with that, and then say, okay, well, all right, maybe I can't retire at 60. Maybe it has to be 63 or 65. All right, at least I know that. At least I can mentally wrap my head around it and prepare. But just, saying, all right, I'm going to retire at 60, and then after a couple of years being like, oh crap, the money's not going to make it. I got to go back and start working again 4 or 5 years after I thought I was retired, not because I want to, but because I have to. That's not great, right? I think a lot of our clients want to work through retirement, right? A lot of them do the whole part-time work, which I think is like the biggest trend in retirement now, is the whole cycling between full retirement and part-time work, right? And we're seeing that all the time. It's amazing how many clients come in and after a year of being retired and like, hey, I started this project, or I'm working back in my old company 5 hours a week, 10 hours a week, just because I can. Or, one of my happiest retired clients started an eBay business, right? He'd like to go on weekends to flea markets and shop, and then he would take those items and post them up on eBay. He had his specialty in electronics, but that's what he loved to do. He loved to go to the flea markets and those sort of sales to find the the gizmo or the gadget that, was $10 at the flea market. He know he could sell for 25. Like, that's not my definition of fun, but that was his. He loved it. He was like, "Oh, I found this thing. It was the greatest, blah, 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 and I'm going to sell it and make $50." Like, he didn't need the money. It was more the thrill of the hunt.
And so just to kind of put a bow on that, your most successful clients have been consistent. Right? Whatever they did, they've been doing it for a long time. But there are also a subset of clients who haven't really had the base of financial literacy, which is many people in America, and they only have 5, 10, 20, 15 years till retirement. But, rule of 72 would suggest that your money should double every 10 years with a reasonable return. So even if you're 10 years out from retirement, you're 55, want to retire at 65, any time's a good time to start deferring, the growth.
Right. And again, those, we've dealt with those clients all the time that have been so focused on other things and like, hey, I just turned 50. I want to retire someday. I don't have a lot saved up. All right, well, let's really focus, right? This is what we need to do. This is what your cash flow needs to be. This is the type of retirement that you can expect. And so, again, I think understanding that as soon as possible to say like, okay, I had a lot of fun in my 40s, or I had a lot of financial responsibilities in my 40s. They're starting to loosen up. How can I get from where I am now to later? One of the other things I always say to people, because a lot of them come in and say, "Oh, I wish I started earlier. I wish I did this. We can't change what we did in the past, right? All I want to talk about is what we're going to do moving forward, right? I don't really spend a lot of time commiserating with my clients about bad financial decisions they've made in the past, because that's kind of a waste of time, waste of energy, right? Like, you can either focus on what you did wrong or kind of focus on what you're going to do better. And so I'd rather spend my mental energy on what I'm going to do better than what I did poorly in the past. So yeah, maybe you don't have enough saved up for the average 50-year-old. So what does that mean? That means you're going to have to save more. That means you're going to have to focus more. Might mean that, your whole idea of retiring at 65 is going to be more like 70. But when do you want to know that? Do you want to know that now when you just turned 50, or you want to wait till 60? And then that decision may got pushed off even longer. Maybe that's 75 now, right? Or so as soon as you are ready to take finances seriously, I think that's a great time to talk with us. I think that's the one thing that on our side is probably the worst type of client, is the one that comes in and wants us to either say, "You're doing great, get out the door," like doesn't want our advice, right? It's coming to us because they feel like they have to, but they're not really invested, right? We can't do financial planning on somebody. We can do it very well with somebody, right? Like, the person has to be ready, emotionally ready, just wanting to do the work that comes along with what we do, right? We do a lot of it for our clients, but if we set up a budget and then they just go off and blow the money, that's not going to be helpful to them long term. And so, the worst type of clients are the ones that don't want our advice. They're coming in because they feel like they have to, and they're just going to keep doing what they're doing, right? And maybe they're not successful now. And so those are the ones that, when you're ready to work, we're ready to work with you. We'll do it with you. We'll be on the journey with you. We're not going to do it on you. So,
well, good point. I mean, and that's a reasonable segue into our next segment, which is many misconceptions, where we talk about common thought that people might have about our industry, whatever that might be. And just a quick pause. We're going to get to it, and I am just excited to talk about how your opinion as an employer. And so we're going to have a lot of people listening to this that are employees. And so maybe leveraging your expertise as an owner, as a business owner, as a boss, can allow them some expertise to take away. But we're going to get to that. The many misconceptions segment should be a good one too. The first piece of knowledge that people have that I've done some research on that I want to debunk is I don't need to understand my investments. My employer handles that, specifically referencing 401ks. And then the next piece of misconception kind of goes right in line. My 401k will be enough for retirement.
Huh?
So let's hit on the first one. What actually does the employer do in their 401k to maintain
So
the asset?
as an employer, and again, we work with a number of plans, there's usually, most of them don't really care about the investment lineup. They just want a cheap, easy one to deal with, one that, causes them the least amount of work, right? So, you know, it is important for an employee to understand what they're invested in and um, how it's good for them, right? So again, if you take the person that starts saving early and has saved for a long period of time, maybe they need to be in a more conservative portfolio because they have a large pool of assets already. If they're the groups that are coming in late to the game or are already know they're going to defer retirement for a number of years, maybe they need to be more aggressive. Most people are in 401k plans are in what's called target date series, right? It's a good investment, but it's good for the masses, not for the individuals, right? So it treats every 30-year-old the same, every 40-year-old the same, every 50-year-old the same in that plan. And again, if you're a 40-year-old that has saved since you were 20, you're different than the 40-year-old right next to you that this is the first time they're putting money into a retirement account. And so the plan itself, the target date series, treats those two 40-year-olds the exact same, and they're not the exact same financially. So again, they're good for the masses, but not for the individual. And so if that's what the business owner is more worried about, it's okay. This particular fund is good for 70% of the 40-year-olds out there, right? But, if you're part of the group that isn't in that 70%, what do you need to do? Do you need to be more aggressive? Do you need to be more conservative? So I think that's the important thing to think about as an individual is, are you the average 40-year-old or are you different financially because of different issues that you've dealt with in your 20s and 30s. So sure. I think that's a big misconception. And I think the other big one is how many people, especially in that age, you change jobs, you change careers of like, oh, I don't need to worry about my old 401k. I'll just leave it, right? And it's amazing how many people will come to us with 5, 6, 7 different retirement plans. And, they're not managing them. Maybe they're organizing them, right? Maybe they have a file and they put the last quarter statements in a folder so they know where it is, but they're not going through and saying, okay, how does, the plan A, investments compared to plan B's investment compared to my current investments, right? They're not looking at that sort of detail of it. And so we're a big proponent of simplification. You really only need 3 retirement plans at any point in your life. You need a rollover IRA that can collect all the old 401ks that you might have. You might be able to, if you're working as a gig employee or a 1099, you could put some money into there on an annual basis as well. Or a Roth IRA, you bought one of those if you're able to fund it. Maybe you put a little bit of money into that. And then you need your current 401k. And beyond those 3 accounts, you really don't need anything else, right? There's really nothing that an old employer's 401k can offer that your rollover IRA can't offer. And so that's usually one of the big things that we talk about with employees. And the other thing that happens is, if you move around a lot in your 20s and 30s and they can't get a hold of you, there are mechanisms for them to surrender those assets to the state. Now, that doesn't happen often, but it happens. It's happened to our clients in the past, especially if you move out of a state. They get less and less. They get less and less data about you, so it's tougher and tougher for them to find you. So, I don't understand why people don't combine their old 401ks, and so that would be something that I would advocate strongly for, right? Set up a rollover IRA, move it to your current 401k. Don't leave an old 401k behind. There's no reason that you need to leave the old 401k behind. Move it forward, simplify your life, and combine them.
Yeah. And just the last point you made, I think is very good. So 3 accounts, but I might even add a total, all your investment accounts. So you've got a rollover IRA, you've got a Roth IRA, you've got your current 401k, and then you've got potentially a taxable brokerage account.
Yeah.
That should be really the summation of your financial situation. Maybe you've got an HSA, but that's different part of the conversation. The first thing that you mentioned about the owner, I want to highlight too, because many owners of businesses who we work with on 401ks don't have the expertise in finance to be able to maintain and know what's best for all of their employees. That's why they hire us as an advisor. So for the folks listening, it's definitely worth your time to reach out to HR and say, hey, do we have an advisor on our 401k? I mean, that person is made free of charge to you. Ask them questions, ask us questions, whatever that might be. I mean, you wouldn't go to your doctor for medical advice. You wouldn't go to your doctor for financial advice. The same way that an owner of a tech business that we have as a 401k, you're not going to the owner who's really good at operationally to talk to him about your finances. I mean,
Right.
maybe you are, maybe he's a closeted CFP, but who knows? Anyways,
That's honestly successful business owners that have no idea about finance, no idea about investing, right?
they've got money, but they're not financially savvy or whatever that might be.
They're focused on what they do well, right? So usually if you're a business owner, you're really good at sales or logistics or something along those lines. Maybe you're good at investment, maybe you're not. Just because somebody's wealthy doesn't mean they're good at investing, right? We have lots of clients who are very, very wealthy, very, very successful at what they do, and they don't know how to spell mutual fund or stock, right? They just don't have that in them. And so I know a lot of times people kind of idolize, well, it's a business owner, I'll ask him how he's investing. That's not appropriate for most people, right? Your cash flow is different, your timeline's different, you have lots of differences. And so again, like what your example is, you wouldn't go to your boss and ask him about a mole on your back, right? You're going to go to an expert on that. So don't go to your boss and say, is my allocation correct? So, I think that's when you can talk to the 401k advisor. There's definitely somebody that you can reach out to if you have a 401k to talk to them about, is the allocation right? Should I be putting more in? Should I be putting money into the Roth component or the pre-tax component? Is there a match? What do I have to do for the match? So there's all sorts of things that we should be, or people should be thinking about that usually they're not thinking about. If they go ask their boss for their investment advice. So,
yeah, and that's a good point too. And then we'll move to the next segment. I think it's that there might not necessarily, like I said at the very beginning, there might not be a right way to do things, but there's a most efficient way to do things. And so, working with an advisor can help you with that, or doing your own research, right? So next segment we'll hop into is horrible headlines. And so this segment, we go all over the place, whether it's on TikTok or the Wall Street Journal, places you might think headlines might be beneficial to you or might be correct. And we take those down, we analyze them, and we talk about why they're good or why they're bad. The first headline that I've got here is from actually Morningstar, which is a tool that we use all the time, and that the world probably knows. And I quote, "The stock market is about to collapse. You have to sell everything now," with an exclamation point. And that is crazy. The point of that article, if you read into it, is that financial institutions recognize what clickbait is.
Yep.
And just tell me about that. Tell me about the fear in that might.
I mean, I think a lot of clients might read that headline. And again, all they're trying to do is get you to, click on their link, look at the story. It's amazing how many people have called for, the stock market to go down by 50% every year for the last 10 years. And so they get good headlines because they're out of the norm, right? Like most people aren't saying the market's going to go down by 50% this year. If one person does, we kind of tend to say, oh, why are you thinking about that? You're so out of the box. You're different than everybody else. So let me find out why you're so out of the box. But if you take a step back, and again, we've talked to many different people about that, marketers are some of the best well-educated people out there, right? If you kind of take a step back and really kind of think about your life and how you shop. Well, you go into a grocery store, for example, everything is placed for a reason, right? There's a reason why the healthier cereals are up top and the sugar cereals are down below, because the kids can grab them easier, right? If there's a reason why milk and eggs are in the back left corner of any grocery store, right? Because that's what most people want when they come in, and it's the furthest point away. Everything is done for a reason. Nobody's out there trying to sell you something or have you subscribe to something that doesn't understand about behavioral finance and is trying to use your emotions against you, right? They're hoping that the quick reaction, the quick click, the emotional response happens, because that's when they can sell you, right? Like, we buy way more on emotion than we do on logic. And so I think what we try and do is say, okay, so this is the bad headline. Let's talk about it. Why does the person think this way? What are the things that he thinks are going to happen, and how likely are those? The more that we can talk to our clients and rationalize the argument, usually the more sane, logical they become, right? We have this tendency, fight or flight, right? So we see the headline and we're scared and we want to go 100 miles in the opposite direction. But then if we talk about the logical steps behind it and what it could be, and then the probability of each one of those steps, well, now they're coming back more towards the middle. And so I think that's one of the big things that we do, is we don't react, right? I mean, sometimes not reacting is a reaction, right? You got to train your brain not to go as far out as you possibly could with every big headline that you get. And, we've been doing this for so long that you can kind of see, we've probably read that article more than one time in the last 10 years. It's like one of those things where people catastrophize a lot. And we also, see the opposite headlines of, like, the market's going to double next year. Oh, well, what does that mean? Like, how would that happen? How logical is that? And, sometimes clients call us, say, oh, I heard this penny stock is going to go through the moon. Okay, well, let's talk about it. What business is it in? I don't know. I just saw the article. Well, you probably should know a little bit more about the company before you get overly excited about it, right? Like, what does it do? How does it grow its business? Why is the stock going to go up that much? I don't know about that. I just saw the headline. Well, okay, we need to understand it a little bit more. We try and slow people down, right? I think that's probably the biggest thing that we can help out with, is a lot of times people get overly emotional and want to react quickly. We want to react slowly. We want to go through it logically and find out what is the why behind the headline. And usually the why behind the headline is they're trying to sell a magazine, or they're trying to sell a particular investment or something. So that's usually what we kind of talk to our clients about, is, okay, let's go a little bit step further. Let's go to the why and let's figure out if it actually makes sense.
Yeah. And even the people, so at the beginning of every year, we look at S&P forward returns, where the major wirehouse, biggest investors in the world think the S&P is going to be at the end of the year, right? And we might look at a dozen, 15, 18 of these, Goldman Sachs, UBS, JP Morgan. I don't know that I've ever seen, of those 12, 15, 18 folks, actually be correct where they think the S&P is going to be at the end of the year, right? And to your point originally, if you're reading a headline where someone is calling for something, whether it's a stock market crash, whether it's a certain stock to go to the moon, like, why are they calling for it? Let's take a step back, understand, pull the good parts out of it, get other opinions, pull the good parts of those, and create a summation that is a good recommendation. And so that's what we do with our investment.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, I think thinking slow is really good when those headlines pop up. And again, in our industry, there's always going to be bad headlines. I don't, we have some people who say, oh, I want to wait for things to calm down before I invest. Then you're never really going to invest, right? Because there's always something going on. We're so connected economically for the rest of the world that there's always a disaster someplace in the world. There's always a bad headline. There's always something that's coming up around the corner. And so what you got to do is say, yeah, I know it's coming. How big of an effect is it going to have? Let's try and figure out the effect that it's going to have. It sounds awful. I don't like it emotionally, but how does it, affect us financially, long term, over the next 10 or 15 years. That's really what we try and focus on is the longer term, not the noise in the short term, because there's always going to be noise.
And when we look long term, very often with our investment committee or with the analysts that we listen to at those big wirehouses, we like to understand economics, micro and macro. So when we're looking at economics, and this leads right into the next quote, as if I planned this, the next horrible headline: the president of the United States has nothing to do with the price of bacon or eggs or gas or any of it. That's the headline. Mm-hmm. And so, just to go back to what I was saying, we speak about economics all the time. Do you want to talk a little bit about this headline? And then because the president has been in the headline talking about inflation and the Fed, let's break that down a little bit.
I mean, it's not wrong. I mean, he doesn't go out there and farm and stuff like that. There's certain rules that the government can implement to lower those prices, but those usually take a long time, right? I mean, it takes a while for a cow to grow, right? I mean, they're born as a calf, they're weighing 50 pounds, and then you got to wait till they weigh like 200 or 300 pounds before you can bring it to the slaughterhouse. So it takes a while, right? So there's always these sort of trends that happen, or statements from a political person, a political party. It takes a while for that to come through the system, right? If there's a bad headline out of Washington, people want to jump, to where it's going to happen like 10 years down the road. And it takes a while for a lot of that stuff to implement. So the president has a small finger on the scales of inflation and GDP and stuff like that, but he can't run it. He can't affect GDP. What Google's plans are probably as powerful as the president's plans, or Microsoft or Nvidia or a bunch of these tech companies, or a few S&P 500 companies have as big an effect on the economy as any politician could possibly have it. So even though we focus on it, and politicians will campaign on it, they really can't affect the economy as much as we think they can, right? Or as much as the general public thinks they can. I mean, again, every 4 years when there's a presidential election and they've done these surveys for a long period of time, if there's a Democrat in the White House, Republicans are usually bearish about the economy. And then the day after the election, if a Republican gets in the White House, now Republicans are very optimistic about the economy and Democrats are very pessimistic about the economy. The economy didn't really change because of one night's election, right? So, again, yes, policies can affect the economy, but it's a nudge. It's not as quick of a lever as a lot of people think. So I would say for most people, don't think about Washington when you're thinking about your investments, because again, your investments should be long-term focused, and who knows who's going to be in the White House in 10, 15, 20 years, right? If you're investing for the next, week or two, maybe a politician's statement makes a difference, right? I mean, you can always get some short-term noise. And so if you're trying to speculate on the market and what it's going to do by Friday, then a politician might have some say in what the market does over the next 2, 3, 4, 5 days. If you're trying to figure out what the market's going to be 10 years down the road, 15 years down the road, or even 2 or 3 years, it doesn't have as big an effect as I think as people think. And so I would say, again, there's always going to be negative headlines. And, again, I think people are understanding more and more about how algorithms work within your social media posts. And, if you want to hate what's going on in Washington, you're going to get a lot of evidence to say how bad it is. If you like what's going on in Washington, you're going to find a lot of evidence to say why it's good. If you're concerned about anything, it's going to show up in your social media. And the one thing for social media that we're understanding, it used to be when I was, in college and stuff like that, advertisement used to say sex sells. Well, algorithms figured out that rage sells even better, right? If people are upset about an issue, they're going to follow it. They're going to go down rabbit holes and watch it and stuff like that. So if you're upset about a headline, you're going to get 20 of those headlines in your algorithm feed the next day. And so I think that's kind of how it spins on itself, which is unfortunate. But again, it drives engagement on social media. So just be aware of it, right? I think a lot of times we need to step back and, just understand that in using a thing that's free means you're the product, right? You're the reason how they're going to get money. If you're not paying a subscription for something, it means you're the product. You're not the client, right? You're not the customer. If it's free and you're using it, you're the product. You're the thing that's valuable and getting sold. So if you kind of think about that and take a step back, usually it's a little better. I think most people should get their news from different sources. Don't go to the same source for everything. You really want to look around and realize that the news cycle a lot of times is selling advertisements more than actually giving you the news.
And that's a great point. We didn't even have to get too deep into the weeds on that one on economics, so that was good. The last segment that we have is my favorite, and I save it for last because I think it's the most interesting. Intelligence that isn't artificial. So what we'd like to do is we're going to educate everybody from the business owner's perspective on this. So what I want to talk about for this segment is the intelligence of a business owner. Talk about what your goals are in tandem with, I know I am your employee, but in tandem with making your employees happy. And so talk about that balance and maybe something we'll talk about what people can take from it.
So one of my favorite quotes for leadership is greatness is in the agency of others, right? If you're a good boss, it really means that you're empowering your employees to grow and be the best versions of themselves, and that's going to make your business more profitable, right? Like if you're a boss that has to micromanage people, if you have to, constantly make every decision, you're not going to really have a successful business, right? Like we want to have a business that, empowers our employees to be the best versions of themselves, that hopefully creates value for the company 5, 10, 15 years down the road, right? So we're trying to use that long-term goal like we do with investing for the business itself, right? How can we have this business be the best version of itself 5 or 10 years down the road? Maybe there's some pain points, maybe there's some bumpiness over the next, 3 to 6 months. But if we do this sort of training, if we, implement these sort of practices, a year from now, we're going to be better off. And so that's kind of our goal or what we focus on as the business owner is like having the company be the best version of itself down the road. I always kind of talk about the business like, a child, like, I love my kids, but they're constantly changing. They're constantly growing. There's new challenges, new things that are amazing about it. And that's the same thing about the business, right? When I started out, it was basically just me and my mom. We would have an assistant sometimes we wouldn't, depending on how we're doing. And, I was just doing everything, and it was kind of exciting. I was into operations. I was in investing. I was doing the financial planning. Then we got a permanent assistant, and that was a little bit better because I didn't have to do the operation side. They would do the account opening, and then I could grow this way. And then we had 2 assistants, and then we had other junior advisors come in, and that was great because now I get to offload some of the work and I could focus on this. And it also had its challenges, right? Every time you bring somebody new in, there's a new challenge of, okay, are the personality is going to work? Is the growth going to work? How are we going to get that person to be the best version of themselves? And then they leave. And so it's the up and down nature of being a business owner. You go through these different stages, but every stage is awesome and every stage has its difficulties, right? And so, especially in our industry, if you ever think, okay, we're good, we don't have to change anything, we've hit nirvana, you're behind the ball, right? Like there's going to be a new thing that's coming out, right? So I think in our industry, because of technology, because of regulation, because of investment choices, because of all these different factors, for us, if I ever said, hey, we're perfect, we're done, it means I'm out as a business owner, right? I'm not trying to grow anymore. And I knock on wood, hopefully I'm never there, right? Hopefully I'm always like, okay, there's always something to improve on. There's always something that we can do slightly better. There's always, a process, an investment, a person that we can get a little bit more out of, right? So that's really what I like to um, try to always do is focus 5 or 10 years down the road. How can we be better? What do we need to grow? What do we need to do to improve the business,
Sure.
down the road? So that's what I like to focus on. And now the really rewarding thing is, mentoring younger advisors, right? I mean, you and the other junior advisors, it's great to see like, okay, your success, right? So getting, when you guys get first millionaire client, oh, that's great. Again, that's kind of like going back to the kids one, like their first success, you're really happy for them, you've educated them, and now they've been able to do the success. It's kind of the same thing in the business. Like we've worked with you, we've educated, we've given processes, and now your successes are happening. And I'm thrilled for you. It's great for our business too, obviously. As you succeed, we succeed. But it's great to see that as kind of like the owner mentor of the people. Oh, this is happening. This is really good. Or if somebody decides, hey, I want to take on a new leadership thing. I think I'm ready to take on this responsibility. That's great as a business owner. We want people to be um, focused on, how can they move forward, right? I mean, again, where I was and what I did when I first joined 25 years ago versus now is totally different, right? And I want that experience for other people, right? We tend to want to find learners and people who are wanting to improve over the time. So,
Sure. And for the folks listening, I think what I've said to clients in the past, and when I'm talking to younger folks getting into any industry, what many people do is they'll go to school, get an education, and then try and go to a really big firm, big name, potentially a big paycheck. You're a small cog in a big machine, but you're working very hard, very often, and I'm sure people can relate to this, that they either have a boss that is constantly on them or talking to them or checking in with them or on their neck, or they have a boss that's never talking to them, right? It's, either way, the career path that's from school to a big firm to a smaller firm is one that opens your eyes to what a good boss looks like. Mm-hmm. And so when you're at a big firm, you have the boss that's breathing down your neck. That's no fun for you. You can't develop as much as you would if someone was, more periodically checking in with you and seeing how your growth was and cares about you. Right. So then they might go to a smaller firm where you're a big piece of a small machine. You get your hands on a lot of different things. You have a lot more opportunity for growth, and then you have some ownership in the processes and the procedures that you develop and that you work on. Yeah. And so, that process so many people do it. Fortunately for me, I got extended a pretty good offer out of college. Right. I had a handful of offers at the bigger firms, but I skipped right from, cut out the big firm and went right to a smaller firm. Right. And so that has been a success so far. And we'll continue to see how that develops. But when you're in that middle segment, you're at that big firm, potentially going to a small firm, a lot of people get golden handcuffs, and for folks who don't know what golden handcuffs are, it's your management team rewarding you and making sure that you stay with the business by giving you stock, bonuses, phantom equity or bonus pools, whatever that might be. So, I'll pick your brain as a manager or an owner of a business that has 14 employees. What are your thoughts? What should people be looking out for when they've gotten to that stage and they have all these different options of 401k? They're getting RSUs, they're getting retention bonuses. Let's hit on that. What are your thoughts there?
I mean, again, I think it comes down to kind of lifestyle, a lot of it, right? So your example of like the good boss, bad boss, and then, the permanency of the good boss, bad boss at a bigger firm, right? Like you might have the best boss there, how long is he going to stay there for, right? So you got to kind of figure out, that dynamic as you're trying to make your long-term plans. But again, I think for most people, happiness is more important than money, right? So you got to figure out what makes you happy. Maybe money is your happiness. Um, but a lot of times it's, what's the culture like? What's the lifestyle like? Do you have flexibility? Again, there's some people that don't want to learn a new skill, that want to go in there and make the widget or do the tasks that they do every day, and they want to do that for the next 30 years. That's not what we're looking for employees, right? So I think there's a job for everyone, and the right fit. And I think it's really understanding what the right fit is for you. Do you want that boss that yells at you and is always looking over your shoulder? Some people like that as a management style. Um, some people want to be left alone and do the same thing that they've done every day forever, and they'll just keep doing it. Some people want to grow and develop. Some people want to manage other people. Some people don't. Like, again, I think there's different skills for everyone. We have a lot of engineers around here in the Boston area, obviously. And the problem with an engineer is usually you get to a certain point in a company, especially a big company, and you're the lead engineer. Well, what's the job after being a lead engineer? It's managing a team. There's lots of, engineers. I don't want to manage somebody else. I want to keep doing what I'm doing. I want to keep, writing code or, doing the engineer thing that I'm doing. I don't want to look over somebody else's shoulder and teach them how to do it. And so I think that's a sort of a pivot point for a lot of people as well. Like if you're in a bigger firm, you have to move up, right? And so is that what you want to do, or do you want to be the engineer that always is just doing the engineering part? Maybe you got to find a different firm. So that's like the culture thing that I was talking about.
Sure.
I think you got to figure out what makes you happy. Because I think early on, when you're younger, most people just take the job that's there that maybe pays them the most or is in the location that they want to be in. And then as you go down the career path, you figure out what's important for you, right? What is the thing that's important to you if there was no salary, or independent of the finances around it? What are the things that you want in a job that you love that have nothing to do with money? Mm-hmm. And if you're good at your job and if you're in a field that is profitable, the money should come, right? So, there's certain fields that you might not be as profitable, so maybe the money can't go up as high as other careers. But what are those things in your work-life balance that are more important to you outside of money? And then finding as many of those things as possible, right? You usually have a 4 or 5 checklists: commute, flexibility, growth, other things like that. You might not get all of them, but can you get a 4 out of 5? Can you get
Sure.
7 out of 10? Whatever the numbers are for you, and then hopefully that career is a thing that you want to do with and do well. And again, the whole follow your passion is a great thing for some people, but usually those people have money already. So it's like find something that you're good at that people pay money for, right? And do it to the best of your ability, right? So, finding your passion is always difficult, but finding something that you're good at that people can pay you for, that you enjoy doing every day. Sure. That's really what I would say to do. Yeah. Try and find that, and then again, try and find what's important to you in a job that doesn't have anything to do with money.
Yeah, and money's a very interesting topic.
Right.
That is a really good point. That trying to find the 4 out of 5 things that are suitable for you, you can try and work on the 5th thing. Can I ask you? And I'm putting you a little bit in the hot seat here. What are your thoughts on negotiating salary for employees? And so for the people listening, advocating for themselves, or what are your general thoughts when maybe someone comes to you and asks about it?
I mean, again, I think it's always good to advocate for the salary and say this is what I think I belong, or if you say, hey, I want to make X, what do I have to do to get there, right? So if you want to make more than what you're making now, and you went to your boss and say, what do I need to do to get there? They might say hey, you got to put in 3 or more years. You gotta be the manager, or you gotta, up your sales, or you got to do something like that. So I think if you say like, how can I get there? I think that's usually a good thing to ask a boss, versus saying I deserve it. You know, so I think it's more about how do I get there. And I think knowing your value, right? Saying like, okay, I went, there's lots of websites that will say the range. Um, but you also got to make sure that the range is accurate for the job that you're actually in and doing, right? So a lot of them are, I'm a salesperson. Okay, well, we're all in sales. Well, the one that has the highest pay is sales, and they're producing 5 times as much as you. So that's not equal, or they have 10 years of experience and you got 5. Well, that's a little bit tougher. And even though you're a good salesman, sometimes it just takes time, right? Sometimes there's steps to get into to get those sort of higher salaries. And some of it is experience and time, and, having to have the right spots. But I think talking to the boss about what do you have to do to get to a certain spot makes more sense than doing it. I would never go in and say like, if you don't match the salary, I'm leaving. That's usually not what a boss likes to hear. So I think, approaching it in different ways, and, hopefully that you're just seeing what you're doing, increasing salary over a period of time, increasing responsibility if that's what you want, and finding those other 4 out of 5 things, getting better and better as your salary is improving, right? So, what do you want? Is the culture where you want to be? Again, I think money is very important, but I think there are other parts of a job that are more important for most people, right? I mean, again, you got a lot of miserable people working, making more money, and then they get caught in that loop of like, I can't switch jobs because I can't take the pay cut. I hate what I do, but if I did this other thing, now my lifestyle won't let me do that. So I think you got to also like, make sure that you understand, the implications of that, and happiness is worth a lot of money as well.
That's true. Hopefully that wasn't an expensive question for you. Yeah. But anyways, I mean, I think that kind of wraps up the intelligence that isn't artificial. Is there anything that you want to leave from the perspective of a business owner for people might listening that they might find advantageous?
I mean, I think, realize that, depends on the type of company. And the bigger company, like if you're in a founder-owned company, right? Realize those people have just had a passion for doing something probably early on. I would say, very few people start doing something and say, I want this to be the biggest company out there, right? I mean, again, usually it's I just love making this widget, or I love doing this, or I love helping people, or there's some sort of passion that started out, and then it kind of turned into this great business. And, so find out like what their passion is, like, why did they start the company? Why were they passionate about it at the point when they started it, right? I think that's always something good to understand is, the why behind what the company's doing. Now, when you're in those bigger firms, a lot of it is, performance. They got in the treadmill. They wanted to be at a big company. They wanted to manage a lot of people. Most founder started companies. That's not the reason why they started it. It wasn't to, have the biggest company. It was because they really enjoyed what they're doing, and success came along. And so then they kept going with it. But again, that's usually not the reason why they started it.
Yeah.
So
makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for
Absolutely.
coming on today. Again, for the folks listening, this is Spencer Betts over at Bickling Financial Services. If you ever had any questions, if you own your own business or want his perspective on our business, feel free to reach out. Again, my name is Jack Freedman, leading the 3rd episode of the Securing Tomorrow podcast. Like I said, if anyone has any questions or would like to reach out and have a conversation or a consultation for completely free, please do. And that's the 3rd episode.
All right. Thank you very much.
Bickling Financial Services is a group comprised of investment professionals registered with Hightower Advisors, LLC, an SEC registered investment advisor. Registration as an investment advisor does not imply a certain level of skill or training. Some investment professionals may also be registered with Hightower Securities, LLC, member FINRA and SIPC.
Advisor services are offered through Hightower Advisors LLC. Securities are offered through Hightower Securities LLC. This is not an offer to buy or sell securities. No investment process is free of risk, and there is no guarantee that the investment process or the investment opportunities referenced herein will be profitable. Past performance is neither indicative nor a guarantee of future results. The investment opportunities referenced herein may not be suitable for all investors. All data or other information referenced herein is from sources believed to be reliable, and any opinions, news, research, analysis, prices, or other data or information contained in this presentation is provided as general market commentary and does not constitute investment advice. Bickling Financial Services and Hightower LLC or any of its affiliates make no representations or warranties, express or implied, as to the accuracy or completeness of the information or for statements or error or omissions, or results obtained from the use of this information. Bickling Financial Services and Hightower Advisors LLC assume no liability for any action made or taken in reliance on or relative or relating in any way to this information. The information is provided as of the date referenced in the document. Such data and other information are subject to change without notice. This document was created for information purposes only. The opinion expressed herein are solely those of the authors and do not represent those of Hightower LLC or any of its affiliates. Bickling Financial Services and Hightower Advisors LLC or any of its affiliates do not provide tax or legal advice. This material is not intended or written to be used or presented to any entity as legal or tax advice. Clients are urged to consult their tax and/or legal advisor for related questions.